So, last week we finished chapter 4, and so, the Holy Spirit being so practical, where are we going to go next? Chapter 26, which is called the transition, and we are in transition from one thought system to another, from one world to another, from illusion to truth, and on and on and on, as long as we think we're in transition. Section 1. The quote sacrifice of oneness. I guess we could stop right there. It's always important to note when they were directed, the scribes were directed to put quotation marks around something. It generally means that it's not an accurate term, really, because it's an impossibility. Right. Sacrifice is an impossibility. Power of something that's powerless is an impossibility. So you can't sacrifice oneness. You can't change truth. You can't lose your reality. But you can use your mind to believe that you have done so, which is an illusion.
Which is why it's clear in the thought of time and space, where it says, into eternity where all is one, there crept this tiny mad idea. Its purpose was to stop eternity with this tick of time. So this whole thought system is based on a sacrifice or a giving up or a sense of loss. So you can see in this as a foundation for this thought. Easily you can locate a sense of guilt, a sense of fear, a sense of judgment, foreboding, because it is about the loss of all.
Once you start, and it says into eternity where all is one, well, where is eternity? Eternity is in your mind. Time is in your mind. Timelessness is in your mind. It's a matter of what you're going to choose. Once this thought got in the mind, it was immediately corrected, but we're choosing to listen to the echo of it. And the echo of time is past, but we're listening to the echo of it. We're believing an echo of it. So eternity is in the mind. It is a part of reality that is understood in the mind. It is utilized in the mind. Or time can be utilized in the mind. Either way. But in order to give up everything, and we've talked about this before, if you give up everything, you can't have more than everything. So if you're asking for specialness, you have to go less. Well, once you had that thought of less, that's the thought of sacrifice. And once you activate the thought of loss and sacrifice, and now you say, oh, well, I want to enter in a world that's based on that, a false world based on that, then everything within it is going to be loss and sacrifice. Everything in it. Because it's built on that thought. You'll never find the fullness of everything in this false world of loss.
See, that's why there's no stability in this ego idea. And that's why the ego is so uncertain and fearful about loss. The loss of that life, the loss of that idea of being something other than what you really are. It's a fragile, fragile system of thought that we exert great energy to protect and sustain.
All right. In the quote dynamics of attack, again, dynamics in quote because attack has no dynamic. Dynamics comes from the word dyno, which means power. There is no power in attack. The mind cannot attack. So in the dynamics of attack, is sacrifice a key idea? It's the pivot upon which all compromise, all desperate attempts to strike a bargain, and all conflicts achieve a seeming balance. It is the symbol of the central theme that somebody must lose. Now let's stop here. All that is in heaven is relationship. It is the Father and the Son's creation in total communion with one another, in total love with one another, and extending that love and extending that communion forever and forever and forever and for always. So anything that we make up as an allusion to that truth is exactly the same thing. So if we have a thought of sacrifice and we're trying to project it out in all these symbols, what we're really doing is saying, in my relationship with my brothers and with Father, I will have sacrifice. And we talk about the power of this, trying to manipulate this power. And it tells you how you do that, what we just read. You're striking bargains all the time. You're compromising all the time. Everything's in conflict all the time in this false world. Why? Because we've sacrificed by crucifying our relationship with our brothers. We're crucifying the Son. We're destroying the Father, because if you don't have a Son, you don't have a Father. And so it's all relationship. What the conflict that we see in this so-called world is nothing but the conflict in our relationships. That's why this course is all about healing these relationships. Having a holy relationship, seeing what a holy relationship is and returning you to the fullness of your communication, the fullness of your communion, which would then be reflected in the real world as a peaceful and loving manifestation. And use that vision, the Christ vision in the Christ mind, to have that same thing.
See, it says in another place, you sacrifice power to establish this idea, this concept. So when you sacrifice the power of the mind, how did you do that? Well, the power of the mind works in conjunction with the will, which the will is what you are or who you are. You are the will of God. The will of God in heaven is creation. The will of God in the Christ mind is healing. So there is no power operating unless it's operating in healing or creating. But what we did is we sacrificed that to try to establish a false power in the symbols that we made to represent our thought system. Now, when I see the brother under this system of thought, the brother's got what I want or what I need. He's got part of the power, or she's got part of the power. So our relationship is not about joining. It's about getting close enough to sacrifice myself with that person to get the power and bring another self about. Right. So it's always about sacrifice, and it's about a sense of loss of power.
And sacrifice can never work because your reality is not sacrifice. Sacrifice is killing yourself, attacking yourself. So if you're going into a relationship by attacking yourself, which the first attack would be, I need something outside myself. I need something in this relationship, in this association. You've already attacked your idea of your reality, which is the fullness of knowledge and being. So there's the first attack. It's always attack on self. Okay, the second attack is, okay, in order to enter into this relationship, I'll sacrifice something of myself. That's the second attack. Because I believe it will fill this place of lack, which came in my initial attack of myself. Okay, so now you have attack. You have these, quote, dynamics of attack going. Now guess what? The other person on the other side is doing the exact same thing. They had a thought of lack. Now they're looking for something they see in you that they can get and increase their power, increase their level of satisfaction and comfort within this false world of instability. And guess what? That can never work. All that attack keeps working. That's why the Course says the minute you start a special relationship, it's going downhill from there. Because all of these dynamics, quote dynamics, that we believe in are at work. And so it may be 2 days, it may be 60 years. But ultimately, that relationship, what you were looking for, it will fail. And I don't care if you've talked yourself into you are in the most wonderful relationship with someone for 50 years. When that body dies, or appears to die, and they are no longer there to fulfill your need, it has failed.
Well, and there's another interesting side to this. You sacrifice in that brother that you think you're seeing somebody else. Mm-hmm. It says you only meet yourself. So that's the third level of sacrifice of self. Is because an attack on the brother is an attack on the self.
Right.
Because you only meet yourself.
If he's not whole, you're not whole.
Right.
So therefore it's an attack. Once this thought starts, this tiny mad idea, it just continues throughout. Every symbol, everything you're trying to believe to hold the thought in place, it's going to reflect in that.
There's two things that we really need to establish here in this beginning of this. We're dealing with power, loss of power, and we're dealing with the loss of power through sacrifice. So somewhere along in this, as we go through this study, we're going to see the reversal of this. Right. And how do you return back to power? And it will be giving up this idea of sacrifice.
Somebody must lose. Its focus on the body is apparent, for it is always an attempt to limit loss. The body is itself a sacrifice, a giving up of power in the name of saving just a little for yourself. To see a brother in another body, separate from yours, is the expression of a wish, not your will, but a wish, to see a little part of him and sacrifice the rest. Look at the world and you will see nothing attached to anything beyond itself. All seeming entities can come a little nearer or go a little farther off, but cannot join.
Now see, this is a disjointed idea, this world.
Yeah, separation.
It says that you live in your own little private world, which means that you do not join your world with another world. Worlds don't join, they collide. And the one who seemingly is the predominant ego wins by eating up the other world.
Well, think of the Republican nomination. All these people, you had 16 people running. Did Donald Trump not gobble up all those people until they just disappeared?
And all of that is a symbol.
It's a symbol, right.
It don't mean anything other than we can use it as a symbol of this thought that we're looking at here. Because you got to get back to the source thought. Because that's where the healing takes place. If we manipulate symbols and we get everybody acting right, we haven't accomplished anything until we've dealt with the source, because they won't act right long.
Because your wish really started in nobody act right long.
We can't join. It says you can't join.
You can't. Bodies cannot join. Minds are already joined. Okay, so what we need to return to is that reality. Reality has never been impacted. All we have to do is return to that understanding of reality, to the expression of reality. So the body, and it says in the Course, the ego's interpretation of the body is attack. Why? Because in and of itself, as the hero of the dream, it is an attack. It's a total separation out of oneness into a separate entity called Rich or Larry or Phil. And then that entity looks across the room and says, okay, well, there's another. There's Ray and Jay. So it's a constant attack on a oneness. And therefore, everything keeps rolling. Okay, so I got a body and I've escaped oneness. Great. But the problem is it's an attack. So the body will be attacked. The body will be sick. The body will die.
And you believe that because of this, that you seem to have a choice, a preference, or a judgment in this that you're seeing. See, if you don't see these different entities, you have to have that for perception. And then perception sets up the judgment, the rejecting or the accepting. But see, accepting and rejecting are really the same thing, because you're accepting only to devour, because that's more acceptable to you than the other person.
And then because of this fragmentation, we don't accept anything as a whole. No bodies are accepted as a whole. We say, wow, he's got nice hair and eyes and a smile. Wish that nose was a little better. You know, that kind of stuff. But 3 out of 4 ain't bad. I'll look in the mirror myself and I'll judge my history in relationships and I'll say, hey, this is a pretty good deal, 3 out of 4. So nothing is ever whole. It's always cut up. The world you see, paragraph 2, is based on, quote, sacrifice of oneness. It is a picture of complete disunity and total lack of joining. Now, there's some qualifiers there. Complete disunity. Total lack of joining. Don't pretend that you've joined anything or you've united with anything in the false world, because it is not true. Around each entity is built a wall so seeming solid that it looks as if what is inside can never reach without, and what is out can never reach and join with what is locked away within the wall. Each part must sacrifice the other part to keep itself complete. For if they joined, each one would lose its own identity, and by their separation are themselves maintained. So you can get married in the church and light the unity candle with your 2 separate candles, but that candle never went out. You never blew the candle out. You pretended to blow the candle out, but you never blew the candle out, because that's what's sustaining it. This is your light of your world.
Well, that's interesting. Let's talk about that a minute, because it brought back memories of a time when you and I was involved in a counseling ministry, and we dealt a lot with relationships and couples. And how many times did we hear the little lady say, well, I married him believing I could change him. I just knew I could change him. And the next remedy is, well, I thought if we had a child, for sure. And see, it never works, because you can't make it join. You can't join and then join. Marriage is not joining. Right. We're just using this as an example.
Sure.
It's a symbol of joining, but there is no joining in the illusion. It says right here. It says it's impossible for there to be a joining. Now, the mind in this thought is shrewd enough to establish some kind of false sense of joining and false sense of connecting, of making this thing logical and appear to be like disjointed piece and disjointed piece are really not disjointed, they're flowing somewhere. That's a deception. We deceived ourselves into believing that when there is no going somewhere. It's always about protecting the idea of a separate self, and that's it.
This entire world is insane, and the Holy Spirit's job is to show us the insanity and bring you outside and from a viewpoint called the real world, which is a reflection of sanity, to show you the insanity. But you mentioned that marriage in the false world appears to be a joining. But really think about it. It's actually a disjoining. It's saying, okay, we're going to carve out me and whoever, and we are now separate. We are a new family. And he's mine, she's mine. They ain't yours no more, and they ain't ever going to be yours no more.
Right.
And vice versa. So it's actually more of a fragmentation. So when we have these ideas like, well, it's the breakdown of the family that's causing all this. No, it's not. It's this crazy idea that we have of leaving heaven. So if you try to fix all the families, you ain't fixing anything. You're trying to make better a separation.
Well, if you rearrange the symbols, if you play in chess and you rearrange the chess pieces on the table, you've not done anything. And that's all this is. This is the idea. If we move these pieces around, these symbols around, and put this symbol with this symbol, it's going to produce something. A symbol represents a thought. It's already been thought. It's not a thought that's going to be thought. There is no cause and effect in a symbol. It can't do anything except represent or reflect a thought that's already been thought. The thought of separation is the thought of sacrifice. Until that's healed in the mind, that's all it will symbolize.
And chess is a good example of changing the symbols. If everybody wants to be the queen, then if you change the rook into a queen and the rook says, now I'm the queen. Okay, now, well, yeah, but you're no longer the rook. And you're subject to the same rules that the queen had. You're a rook, but now you can't do what a rook used to do. Or whatever. So you're locked into these laws and precepts that override the rules of the game, so to say. Rules of the game were set in the initial tiny mad idea.
That's exactly right. And it's based on sacrifice. It's based on the loss of power. Because power only flows in the will. And my will is the will of the Father. Because that's my identity. When I try to get another identity, I sacrifice power. The mind can make illusions, but that's all it can do. It can't make them real.
The little that the body fences off becomes the self, preserved through sacrifice of all the rest.
All the rest must lose this little part, remaining incomplete to keep its own identity intact. In this perception of yourself, the body's loss would be a sacrifice indeed, for sight of bodies becomes the sign that sacrifice is limited, and something still remains for you alone. And for this little to belong to you are limits placed on everything outside, just as they are on everything you think is yours. For giving and receiving are the same, and to accept the limits of a body is to impose these limits on each brother whom you see, for you must see him as you see yourself. Again, that's what I was just saying about the rules of the game. If you're going to set the rules of a body and a separate identity across the table, you just set them for yourself. Therefore, in this balance of power, it's still balanced. So you're not finding any power. That's why everybody wants to change the laws. Well, let's change the rules. There's 10 people here subject to the same rule. But if I can go to the rule maker and say, hey, well, let's change the rules. Let's not let anybody else know so that I can gain an advantage, at least for a period of time. We'll say taxes, tax law. Everybody else doesn't know about this secret loophole. Okay, I got the loophole. I asked for the loophole. I have the loophole. So I go in and I try to gain an advantage, believing I'm gaining an advantage by knowing something and having a private thought that is not shared for my own advantage and thinking that I'm going to gain by that. Well, all that's built in attack. I'm attacking these other people that aren't functioning under the same rules. And I'm gaining. We just said there can be no loss in the real world. There is no loss in the real world, but in this world, somebody must lose.
Well, see, the ego, in order to keep you headed down this path of seeking something where there's nothing to be found, strikes what I call a dualistic balance. Now think about that. Take the balancing scales. They can detect the least little thing. And I put on the right scale, nothing. And I put on the left scale, nothing. To the ego, I have balanced this thing because that's exactly what you're doing. You're taking nothing and trying to balance nothing with nothing. It always equals nothing.
You have winners and losers of nothing.
Right.
And nothingness. So I have a whole bunch more of nothing than you do, so I feel good about myself.
But in order for perception in time and space with bodies and ego selves to work in any way at all, you've got to believe that that is something rather than nothing. So you give it through levels and degrees. We give different things value. We reject and we accept in our little world of illusion.
And that false generated power of that manipulation is what the Course calls magic.
Right.
All right, we're in paragraph 4. The body is a loss and can be made to sacrifice. And while you see your brother as a body apart from you and separate in his cell, you are demanding sacrifice of him and you. What greater sacrifice could be demanded than that God's Son perceive himself without his Father, and his Father be without his Son? Yet every sacrifice demands that they, the Father and Son, be separate and without the other. The memory of God must be denied if any sacrifice is asked of any one. All right, let's stop there. So, all sacrifice begins with the sacrifice of the Son, with the crucifixion of the Son, the separation of the Son from the Father, when they are one forever. That thought, that's why it's always going back to dealing with crucifixion, because it never happened. So, Jesus says, okay, forget this crucifixion thing, focus on the resurrection, because the resurrected mind will bring you back to the realization that the Father and Son could never be apart.
And see, in order for this thing to be sustained, this idea of the tiny tick of time, which is the echo of time, because it was corrected, like we said, it says that you have entered into a process, a cycle, where you relive that instant of terror, where you believe that you attacked the Father, and all of heaven was lost. And in that you die. In your thinking, you die. Only to be resurrected again in that same instant, back to your reality.
Because that thought was immediately corrected.
Because that thought was immediately corrected. So you're just entering into a cycle until you stop the cycle by making a decision. That's where the decision comes in. Accept the holy instant, which is the gateway or the doorway into the real world, into the happy dream, into the Christ mind, into the healing of perception, where perception sees only the will and the mind as one, and the Son returns back to the Son and the Son to the Father, because you never lost him.
All right, so let's go over that again to make sure anyone listening gets it. The tiny mad idea was thought in a tiny tick of time and immediately corrected. An unholy instant corrected by a holy instant, corrected by the return to knowledge.
Right. And the false world replaced.
The false world replaced by the real world. The Son sees both, recognizes there could never be a false world, that it's an illusion. I am a child of truth.
Right.
I accept my reality, and I continue my creation, which is my function in heaven, and the enjoyment of the communion and creation of Father and Son and the Son's creations. Okay, now, but in this tiny tick of time, I made a thing called memory. And I decided I can hear an echo of that unholy instant, and I can choose that unholy instant. But the holy instant is also echoing. And once I remember the holy instant, it says it's unforgettable. Of course it's unforgettable because it's the only reality in illusion. All right, so all you're choosing is continued unholy instance rather than the holy instant that has corrected it.
What I see in that is you locked your awareness up in one or the other, because it says you can only follow one system. You can't follow two systems. So you can't actually make the false real. But you can lock your awareness up in the false.
By belief.
By belief. And what you believe to be reality. The resurrection is the returning of the mind back to the ability to choose awareness of the correction. To see again the real world and say, hey, this is it. This perception thing needs to be corrected. So I'm going to bring all illusions to the truth and allow those things to be corrected. We read earlier in some of our past lessons where it says perception can be perfected, which means it only has one function. It has received the function of healing. It sees the healed mind. And that's all it perceives. It doesn't perceive separation anymore. But that takes place by accepting the correction in this real world or in the Christ mind.
The Course talks about the holy instant, that you learn to remain in the holy instant. You learn to see only the real world and no longer see the false world. And from that place of peace and joy and the extending of love, it's easily translated back to knowledge. Now, you hear people saying, okay, well, this is my last cycle. I'm not doing this again. Okay, but the question is, that's fine. You're saying, okay, in 30 years, I'm going to be done with this, and I'm not going to have any more lessons. I'm going to learn all my lessons now. But what Jesus is saying is, choose the holy instant right now. Quit choosing an unholy instant. What keeps us stuck into choosing that unholy instant? It's all these symbols and situations that distract us from staying in that holy instant. Stop the madness, stop the insanity, but stop choosing an unholy instant right now.
Well, it says that you made a voice and you were given a voice. The voice you were given was the voice of the correction, the Holy Spirit, or the Father's voice for the Father. But if the voice I made, the ego, is screaming at me and I'm still following the insanity, I'm cycling. I'm putting this thing off, see? But I don't have to do that because I can get still and listen and choose the correction. I've already chosen it. I just need to return to my choice, really.
I remember I think it's in the book of Revelation, I've mentioned this before, it says, behold, I create all things new. When I read that years ago, I said, well, how long is a thing new? New means in time. Well, how long would it be new? And back then even, I got the realization that I created new. Oh, is it old now? No, I just created it new. I created it new. I created it new. It's always new. There's another verse in the Bible that says, His mercies are new every morning. Let's put it this way. His mercies are new every instant.
Right.
I got a fresh start. A holy instant. I'm staying there.
Right.
Oh, look what just happened. Oh, I yelled at somebody. I got angry. New. Created new. Holy instant. Holy instant.
See, there is no guilt in that, and there is no sin.
Mm-hmm.
We made all that up. And the way the term is in this cycle of choosing time but seeing the real world and then choosing time, this cycle is that says you die only to be raised back up and reborn. See, it's a new birth, and then it's a dying, and it's a new birth. But the Course is saying, quit running to death. Stop the cycle and embrace the new birth.
Just stay there.
Just stay there. And in that arena is where you are totally healed, where this perception idea is concerned. The last judgment is giving up the idea that you need perception. That's the greatest thing that can happen.
So I'm choosing the resurrected mind until I recognize there's never been a need for resurrection.
Exactly right. And you stay in that environment. And how you stay there is you heal. You function. You extend that to the brethren, to the mind, and you heal the mind.
Because that's what love would do. And your natural state is sharing love and communion.
See, I like the practicality because it says every time you attack a brother, you enter back into death. In other words, that's how you stay in that cycle. But how you stay in this correction is by healing the brother. Only seeing the brother correctly. That's the stable standard of healing in the Christ mind.
And only bodies can attack. So when you attack your brother, we just read, you first of all cut him off and limited him as a body. Now you're judging his performance or activity or behavior in a body as not up to your standard. So you attack again. Now how fast from that attack can you choose a holy instant? You can forgive that thing right then.
Because it's all in that same instant. Wherever the guilt appears, the correction is there. You can't separate them.
I'm in a process of helping some people with a military reunion. And I've run into a situation already where here's two guys, unbeknownst, hadn't seen each other in 40 years, but they're still holding on to some issue from 40 years ago. I mean, it's just amazing to me because that was an opportunity for me to heal those minds. I love that because that's why I'm here. That is the miracle.
Yeah.
So those minds are already healed. But it shows you that if you don't instantly choose that holy instant, you're stuck with that judgment. In the jail cell, if you use that terminology here, the cell, you see that person in the cell, well, guess what? If you're seeing them in a cell, you're the guard. When you go to a prison someday and look around and see who are the prisoners. Is it the guys inside the cell or the guys standing outside the cell with the uniforms? They're all prisoners. And Jesus talks about that in the Course. If you want to hold somebody in a cell, you got to be standing out there yourself. Well, you're in the prison with them. So walk out of the prison. That's all this Course says, is you can walk out of this prison right now. Of any thought, of any memory, of any past, you can do it right now. Be resurrected.
You said earlier that in order to hold to this echo of time, you had to make a memory. Well, see, what we didn't realize is that we made a vault. When we made the memory of the tick of time, we made a vault that we stored all of our hurts, all of our sacrifices, all of our offenses, all of our deeds. And then we made a voice to remind us of that. It's called the past. And you drag this chain of guilt throughout your lifetime, this life cycle. And you can't do anything about it, because there's always going to be something that will remind you of it, because you're projecting that into your future to be sure and remind you of that in the past. So 40 years can pass real easy because you're dragging that long, long chain of offense or unforgiveness or guilt. That's why we had to start with a tool that we couldn't misuse. It's called forgiveness. You can't misuse that. It's a healing tool. You just let it go.
Okay, so memory, well, I think that's what the next verse says. The memory of God must be denied if any sacrifice is asked of anyone. Again, our memory is not only of the tiny mad idea, but of the correction, of the reality. What witness to the wholeness of God's Son is seen within a world of separate bodies, however much he witnesses to truth? He is invisible in such a world. Nor can his song of union and of love be heard at all. Yet is it given him to make the world recede before his song, and sight of him replace the body's eyes.
Wow, that's power there. See, that's the return to power, is that you, in your accepting the ministry of healing. You see, nothing cannot stop something. And this something is love. Love is the most powerful thing there is. Creation is love. So, an idea that is nothing, that has no power, I don't care how hard it tries, cannot withstand the healing vision of the Son, regardless of the circumstance.
You give up seeing for vision. So literally, in the holy instant, the body disappears. It would have to disappear in your perception because it is a block to oneness. If you want a perception of oneness, the body must disappear and be replaced with first the spark and then the great ray, the reality of the Son that was appearing to be in a body.
Well, the Course says that no instant does the body exist. Now listen to the term. And the instant that we're talking about here is the holy instant where the state of mind has gone from time into eternity. And in that eternity, there are no bodies. So there is no separation. There's no hindrance. That's the state of mind of healing.
So that which used to appear, for lack of a better word, invisible, and with the bodies and what bodies do and see and feel and touch and smell and whatnot here being real, and what was invisible overlooked, now all this action and activity and body stuff becomes transparent. And the reality of the communion with that light and of that oneness with one another, and the communion of the saints, for lack of a better word, that total communication with the Father, the Son, and His creations is what is to the forefront. Everything else is overlooked until it just disappears. You pay no attention to it.
Well, see, the ministry of the Holy Spirit, it says that the Holy Spirit sees only the wholeness of the Son. Well, see, I understand that now because as you enter into that ministry, if I have a brother that comes before me and he says, I'm guilty, I can't agree with that because I can't see that. Not from where I'm at. In the real world, you don't see guilt because you know it's an illusion. Right. Now, to the brother, it may be very real, but the Course says if I don't agree with the illusion, reality takes over. And the brother now can wake up to his holiness and his wholeness, which holiness and wholeness are the same thing. So that's how I healed the brother. I don't look at what he's doing because that's a symbol of the thought of insanity.
He's not doing anything.
He's not doing anything. The Father sees beyond the symbols, cannot see the symbols that we made, can only see the reality of what the Father's thought is, which is a holy Son.
Those who would see the witnesses to truth instead of to illusion merely ask that they might see a purpose in the world that gives it sense and makes it meaningful. Without your special function has this world no meaning for you. Yet it can become a treasure house as rich and limitless as heaven itself. No instant passes here in which your brother's holiness cannot be seen to add a limitless supply to every meager scrap and tiny crumb of happiness that you allot yourself. So that's talking about this happy dream and a real world. The workbook starts out showing you that what you made has no meaning. This is a meaningless world, and it's driving you crazy because it's meaningless. Because meaning can only be found in creation. And so we have to return to creation. And in the world, since we made a world and since another world was given us, we have to return to that other world, which has a function. Its function is forgiveness. Its function is healing other minds. And that's what it says. What a glorious opportunity we now have. We appear in bodies, but we have a function, and this world that we function in, the real world, is no longer meaningless. It's full of meaning. It's full of the expression and extension of love through forgiveness. It's full of seeing people transition from a false world to a real world in an instant. And it's full of minds being healed and light shining and darkness dissipated everywhere you look in this real world.
Well, see, there's two things that comes to mind. Number one is it says the ego is the questioning part of this thought. And the Holy Spirit is the answering part. Well, see, as I stand as the answering part before the question goes away because you are the answer. And you show the answer to the answer. There's a passage in the Bible in the Old Testament that says, show the house to the house. That sounds a little funny, but what it's saying is you don't really see yourself the way you really are. You see yourself in another perception. So there needs to be a standard, and that standard is the Christ mind, the Son, showing the Son to the Son that thinks he's something else. Right. And then there's another passage that says there's only one of two things happening. There is the extension of love, and there's the call for love. And that's it. So there's your questioning and your answering right there.
That's all it need be. That's the only answer. The same answer is given to love, which is extended, you answer with love, or a call for love is answered with love.
That's right.
It's real easy when you always answer the same.
It's so simple.
Same. It really becomes so much more simple every day.
Every day.
Every instant. You talked about the use of the term house in the Old Testament. Well, that talked about the wholeness. The house of Israel, the house of Judah. In
Right.
other words, okay, where are you from? Who are you? Well, I'm from the house of Judah. I'm from this oneness. So you show the house to the house by saying, okay, your identification over here as the house of Judah, we'll say. The house of Israel is the overarching. You've got to change your identity to that which is the whole, instead of this fragmented, oh, I'm of the 12 tribes. Well, wait a minute. There was only one Israel.
There's another good analogy in that, is that if you top the mountain and you looked out over the camp, you would see the 12 tribes camped together, and that's Israel. If you entered on the same level, you might hit house to house to house and see them separate. But this is a seeing the whole. This is seeing the whole house. Right. Let's show the whole house to the house that thinks it's whole when it's not.
So it's a limitless supply of happiness that is available to us. Paragraph 6. You can lose sight of oneness, but cannot make sacrifice of its reality. Nor can you lose what you would sacrifice, nor keep the Holy Spirit from his task of showing you that it has not been lost. Hear then the song your brother sings to you, and let the world recede, and take the rest his witness offers on behalf of peace. But judge him not, for you will hear no song of liberation for yourself, nor see what it is given him to witness to, that you may see it and rejoice with him. Make not his holiness a sacrifice to your belief in sin. You sacrifice your innocence with his, and die each time you see in him a sin deserving death. For whatever reason, he's mentioned in this song, there is a song in heaven that is sung. But it's really just, because there's no time, it's just one note. It's one note, but it's a combined note of every son that has ever been created, singing his song. And that harmony, and the old song from the old Coca-Cola commercial, for some reason it's been running through my mind lately. I like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Why? Because That is the song of heaven, perfect harmony of each note, of each idea of God the Father that was extended, each thought of God that was extended in perfect harmony. That is the song. And you cannot sacrifice that. Now, okay, if I only look to teacher so-and-so as being my brother that has this ability to sing his song of liberation to me, and for me to join with, I'm already lost. I won't even be able to hear him, because every person, seeming human, seeming body, is a son that is singing this song. That song is coming. The question is, who is going to harmonize with that song? Are you going to judge it and hear it funny, or are you going to harmonize with it and recognize it as yourself?
Here's something interesting about that. The Father, in giving the Holy Spirit, the Father says, "This is my voice. This is the song. It's the song of the Son." The Holy Spirit is in every aspect of the mind. The Holy Spirit is in every son. The Holy Spirit is singing one song. It's the song of the Father. Now, I can recognize that song in the Son. Or I can choose not to see that, to see something else. But every brother you meet is the same as you in reality, and in the spirit, and in the singing of the song.
It's a holy encounter. Each one is a holy encounter until you make it an unholy encounter. Let's read this again. It says, "You sacrifice your innocence with his and die each time you see in him a sin-deserving death." Because if you sacrifice one son, you've sacrificed them all. If you judge one son, guess what? The judgment came back on you because you're a son. Now let's go to the next verse. It says, "Yet every instant can you be reborn and given life again."
Right.
That's what we were talking about before. Resurrected, every holy instant resurrected. Till you don't need any more resurrection because you live in resurrection and you stopped living in judgment, this idea of sin and somebody's guilty. And you're living in the innocence of your reality, of the innocence of the Son. His holiness gives life to you who cannot die because his sinlessness is known to God, and can no more be sacrificed by you than can the light in you be blotted out because he sees it not. You who would make a sacrifice of life, and make your eyes and ears bear witness to the death of God and of his Holy Son, think not that you have power to make of them what God willed not they be.
No power.
In heaven, God's Son is not imprisoned in a body, nor is sacrificed in solitude to sin. And as he is in heaven, so must he be eternally and everywhere. He is the same forever, born again each instant, untouched by time, and far beyond the reach of any sacrifice of life or death. For neither did he make, and only one was given him, by one who knows his gifts can never suffer sacrifice and loss. True life was given, true life was received and accepted, and nothing can touch that true life. Nothing at all. This recognition is the resurrection of the mind. This is the resurrection that Jesus talks about. God's justice rests in gentleness upon his Son, and keeps him safe from all injustice the world would lay upon him. Could it be that you could make his sins reality and sacrifice his Father's will for him? Condemn him not by seeing him within the rotting prison where he sees himself. It is your special function to ensure the door be opened, that he may come forth to shine on you and give you back the gift of freedom by receiving it of you. What is the Holy Spirit's special function but to release the Holy Son of God from the imprisonment he made to keep himself from justice? Could your function be a task apart and separate from his own?
So giving and receiving are the same. It says what you give to the Son will give back to you. But if you're not giving to the Son, you're not receiving of the Son. You're seeing a separation. You're seeing a person.
Where you're giving judgment and crucifixion,
right.
And therefore you're receiving. The mind is active. You're functioning every instant in one unholy instant or a holy instant. You're seeing a false world or you're in the real world. You're in your crazy nightmare dream or you're in the happy dream.
You're in fear or you're in love's presence.
Whatever you're given, you're receiving. And why is this? It's because creation never stops. The law of creation is what I extend, I am. Because it's increasing. We talk about our motto, which is we unify by increasing and we always integrate by extending. So, the mind was made as an activating agent of creative spirit. So it is always active even when you're sleeping in this dream, or in the world, and I'm talking about sleeping at night in a bed, the mind is continuing to give and receive. Give and receive, give and receive. Extend or project. You are always extending or projecting, and the results of extending or projecting are being received until you start seeing it correctly. Then you start receiving the real world. He talked about it here. Okay, God's justice rests in gentleness upon His Son and keeps Him safe from all injustice the world would lay upon Him. Okay, when you function in this real world mentality,
Our state of mind. It's
State
all
of
a
mind.
state of mind.
the false world, now under that state of mind, I hate to use this word, but trumps this other state of mind. Okay, that state of mind is invulnerable, so nothing can touch it. Jesus functioned in a way in the earth where He could not be harmed in any manner. The apparent crucifixion of that body was a choice that He says He made as a severe or extreme lesson for us so that we wouldn't need to go through extreme lessons. You don't need to have extreme lessons. We're after peace. The mind's already been resurrected. Jesus has already done it for all because that was the only way He could do it for all. If He didn't do it for all, He didn't do it.
Right.
This is all about the relationship that we're talking about. How a mind is relating and communing with another mind, which is the one mind. If that mind is choosing attack and defense and conflict, then that's what it's going to receive in that relationship of mind to mind. Now, how will it play out in this illusion? It'll symbolize all kinds of conflict out in this world for you.
Right.
Everything's going wrong. Why? Because the relationship's wrong. The relationship's in there. But if I choose the miracle, then the power of that trumps any other belief in power.
Right.
And brings peace to both. Peace is given, peace is received. Now, my world is no longer reflecting conflict. It's reflecting peace. It's reflecting invulnerability. It's stable. It's still. Now, did I go about saying, well, I want to still all these symbols? No, I stilled the mind, and the symbols must be a reflection of that stillness of mind.
To remind ourselves of what we did with time is that we projected our own idea so that we could perceive in symbols what we projected. But we forgot that we're the source of the projection. In the awakened state, in the Christ mind, which is the real world, you're still operating in perception. It's being corrected. But now you're extending your reality, and you are seeing the results of your reality in your brother, because you can only see what you're extending. And what you're extending is the Son. So you give and receive. You give and receive. Love, love. That's all there is. And you see the Son innocent because the curriculum, the sum of the curriculum is that the Son is innocent.
We talked about this whole section here, and we're going to be wrapping up here. This whole section here is about sacrifice. It's about a thought of sacrifice, a thought of lack. So what the Course says, based on what you just said, is whatever you think you lack it because you're not giving it. You already have everything. So if you're thinking that you don't have something, it's because you're not giving what you think you lack. That's a great principle as exercise of mind. If you think you're lacking something, then give it. Oh, I'm lonely. Okay, well, let's give communion and communication. You don't have to leave the house to do that. I'm in oneness. I know I communicate with all. My love is extended to all my brothers, and they are extending all their love to me because I'm loved, loving, and lovable.
Right.
Now, how can you be lonely if you just gave that? Because when you gave it, you received it.
And see, you just hit on whole another wonderful thought here. The Course says that you cannot lock the mind up in the body. See, if you're limited to the body, then you're the body. Your mind is not the body. It's never been the body.
Right.
And it's not a limit on the body if you are awake to that, because you are limitless spirit. You are the limitless thought of the Father. Therefore, you are limitless love. And you are connected to your will, which is the power has returned to its proper function.
The universe of mind, you're one with all in this universe of mind.